who's gathering today, I mean, each of us have had like that spark inside of our heart of like, what could it be like to bring our community together, the people that we're making meaningful impact with, to bring them together in sacred spots on the planet, eat wonderful food, have incredible content, and to experience community together. Like these retreats and what you're doing, what you guys have been doing since the beginning. I'm just happy to welcome the Primal Health community today because we have got a special lineup and share from what Adam and Vanessa have been curating and crafting with over like 15 years of expertise. I too have been in retreats for well over 10 years, and what they have created is something spectacular that I believe all of us should be signing up for. So without further ado, I want to pass this over to the mastermind creative couple that is Adam and Vanessa that are here today to share with us their launch for Retreat Blueprint.
Nice. Thank you so much, Derek.
Thank you so much. So sweet. And we just really want to thank everybody for taking time out of your schedule because we know how it is when you are so busy with everything to come and join us in your busy schedule. We really appreciate it. We want to just get right into our story and kind of meet you where you all are because obviously Tara gives that beautiful introduction, and you're going to get to know us a little bit more as we start to unveil this whole experience together. And so for us to give you just tons of value, we want to hop right in. So obviously you're all Primal Health coaches. Congratulations. It's so exciting. And we started as coaches in the same way that you are, and wherever you are in your journey with that, maybe you have a few clients, maybe you have a full roster. Wherever you are in that journey, you are obviously getting to the point where we did, which was, I think I might be interested in doing live events, retreats. You can sort of see that there's something in there that's piquing your curiosity, and you're feeling like, some of the things that we felt, which were, we were primarily online coaches, and we'd love to hear from you guys in the chat. Can you tell us if you are online, in person, or a hybrid? Because we really want to make sure we're kind of addressing those different concerns from those different reality
Different
sets.
angles. Yeah.
But we really were coaches like you, primarily online virtual. Okay, cool. And we started feeling like, okay, if we could get our people together for a full day or a full weekend, we just started realizing like what we could do to create bigger transformation in them. We started realizing that, even if we have a super high touch 1 hour virtual container, you're only going to get so far in that experience with your people. And what we were experiencing, and you guys can share if this is coming up for you, is that you almost could only repeat the basics. You can almost just stay in the sort of basic set of coaching, and you felt like you couldn't really like drive people as far as you wanted to. Whereas if you could get them kind of sequestered away from their normal life, you feel like you could drop in a little bit deeper and really start to make some change together.
Yeah, there's something about that community environment, and it's something that we've talked about a lot just in, helping people understand the value of a retreat. And it's that one of the things is that people get to show up as a version of themselves that no one else really knows, so, and this is something we really try to help people with in the coaching space. It was always like, man, how much is your community and the people around you holding you kind of in a box, right? We're like, this is how I'm comfortable with you as a person. Right. You eat like me, we go out and we have pizza and beer on football night, or there's like your community knows you as someone. And it can be hard to break free of that, when you're talking about behavior change and trying to make these things happen for yourself. And so in a retreat experience, people get to show up and sort of put their best foot forward. Like, no, I am this person. Like, I'm the person who comes to these things and does this kind of stuff, right? And everyone else recognizes them as that because they don't know them in any other way. And it's such a powerful experience for people to get to truly live for a certain amount of time what it's like to be the person that they're trying to become through the coaching that you're offering, right? And so we're just really passionate about it because it's worked so well.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, when we transitioned from our regular coaching business into the kind of coaching plus retreats, and now we basically run retreats pretty much exclusively now for our own community, and we do it as a service for people. And the reason that it's just stuck with us so much is, well, one, it's fun and it kind of fits into our wheelhouses, but it works so well. It's so impactful for the end user, so to speak, that it's like a modality that just can't get forgot. You know, and it almost did during COVID, right? Like,
Yeah.
during, you know, when you have these crazy lockdown things and everybody goes online and all of this kind of stuff starts to happen, you know, we've found with a lot of the clients that we're working with in the planning side of things now that we're like encouraging people to get back out even now, 4 years later. And it's so important that people are seeing such value in getting back together in person. So
Yeah.
No.
And so what does that equate to, you know, kind of on the like boots on the ground business, you know, terminology is churn rate, right? We actually decreased our churn rate. We, you know, retained our client, our customer lifetime value skyrocketed. I mean, skyrocketed, you guys. We were talking about this prior to coming live with you, and we were, you know, sharing that one of our clients has been on 18 retreats with us. And so, you know,
Yeah.
even though the client, that specific client, you know, we worked with her for years as coaches, at some point she kind of didn't need us as coaches anymore.
She got it. Yeah, it worked.
But she maintained traveling and adventuring and continuing to be a customer on a different level. So that's the other thing about this is that, you know, because you create these incredible results for people, because you create a container in which they can start to experience themselves as somebody new, they get addicted to this and they're like, okay, this is my tribe, these are my people now, and what's next, what are we doing next? And you have these incredible you know, commitment levels from your clients. So that's another incredible thing to start thinking about, especially in this very kind of transient climate that we're in, where people sort of go, you know, they hang out for a while in one coaching community and then they pop into another. This is really going to solidify the container of your community and, again, increase that lifetime value of your customer.
Yeah, for sure. And so to that end, we want to make sure that we really give you guys something really tangible during this time frame. So we're going to jump in and give you kind of some meat and potatoes of the things that we think are really important, the things that we wish we would have had like a pretty solid grasp on when we first started running events, which, you know, side note, the very first event we ever ran was actually with Mark Sisson. We ran the Primal Luxury Retreats back in the day in Malibu with Mark, which was an amazing experience, you know, and there's so many things we wish we would have known, you know, that we
I
learned
can
over the years.
imagine.
Yeah, and so we're gonna try to get through a bunch of that stuff here today. But I want to just mention, you know, obviously we have the Retreat Blueprint, which is our course that is soup to nuts. This is everything that we have learned over the years and put into place. And special for Primal, we're putting together a challenge. So if you guys want to stick through this thing, we'll offer you a free challenge where we are it's the Find Your Spark Challenge. And this is where it's really about ideation, coming up with who you want to serve, what you want to do, like what's your unique offer that you want to bring about in the retreat space. And then we'll get into a little bit of like the first steps of like location research and get you kind of squared away with like, this is what I want to do, this is who I want to serve, and this is where I want to do it, and maybe even a date that you want to pull that together on. And so because we feel like that's really step one, is like, let's get this figured out. Is this for me? What exactly is it that I want to do? And it'll get you guys a chance to get to know us a little bit better. And then for the people who enroll in the challenge, there's a 20% off discount for the course and a chance to get a spot in our Launch Accelerator Bootcamp, which is really our high touch coaching container that gets you from ideation to launch when you're like really ready to go on this. So ton of value, a bunch of cool stuff that we're going to be able to do. And let's just dive into it.
Here's a fun little photo of us with Mark. Again, like Adam said, we've been in the ancestral background for decades. We worked with Mark. I actually started Mark's very, very first in-house coaching program in Malibu. We coached at his primal cons. We did the retreats together. So we're very, very enmeshed and familiar with the world that you all live in. And so I think that's why we're really, really excited to share this specifically with you all, because we know how life-changing and transformative it can be inside of this ancestral world. So
Yeah.
let's talk about preparation.
Yeah, and so first and foremost, the things that we wish that we would have known, like it's the you don't know what you don't know stuff, right? And so we want to just try to knock down a bunch of that. And the preparation component is really what it's all about. And that can be like, yeah, of course, obviously you need to be prepared, and of course you need to prepare for all of the scenarios. But if you don't know what all the scenarios are, you just don't know how to prepare for them, you know? So the biggest thing that we want to impart is just front loading, and not from a perspective of like, oh man, these are all the things that can go wrong, you know, which obviously there are a bunch of those. But how do you prevent that? What are sort of the mindsets and the like mental frameworks for going into the retreat or into the retreat planning process that are going to help you identify those things early on, and then ultimately come up with the ways, the solutions that work for your brand and like what you're up to.
So before we get started, we also just feel free to pop any questions in the chat, and we'll be monitoring that. And we might, wait. The answer to your question might be coming down the line, but if it feels like a good spot to stop and answer your question, then we might just do that immediately. So feel free as things come up to go ahead and just pop them in the chat, and we'll get to those as they fit into the scheme of things today.
Yeah.
So who will attend your retreat? Kind of a big question, right? Kind of an important one. And this is where we say, if you build it, they will not come. This is the only place in our business where we say, this idea that like, if you build it, they will come, does not apply to retreats. And we wish it did, trust me, because that means that, your unique spark and your excitement would be enough to sell out a retreat. But there are some real like logistical, considerations, and there's some real, considerations of who is going to attend this retreat, and really understanding your audience, really knowing who am I building this for, so that you don't launch to crickets. And we've seen this time and time again. So many of our clients actually come to us because they do just that. They get really excited, really inspired. They build something, and they have this, if we build it, they will come kind of mentality. They launch it, and they hear crickets. So we want to really get you to a place where that's not the situation. You know exactly who's going to come.
Yeah, and it's a matter of you have to just be very clear about what the thing is, and this is a big part of the challenge, is like getting super clear on your spark and why you want to serve and all of this kind of stuff. Because the thing that we just see over and over is that you did create an amazing event, right? It is going to be amazing, but it can be harder than you want to articulate the value that people are going to get, especially if you're already doing kind of a hybrid thing where you are coaching virtual and some in person. The in-person people are like, well, I mean, I'm already with you in person, so what am I going to get out of being even more with you in person, right? And so you have to get into this sense of really being able to articulate the value of the retreat itself, and like what's going to be special about that thing that you're putting together.
Yeah, and that's really going to bring you kind of to the next step. And by the way, these are all fun photos from retreats that we've hosted around the globe over the years. So this is us actually whitewater rafting off the highest commercial waterfall in New Zealand. So
in the
fun,
world.
Yeah, in the
That
world.
looks scary.
Yeah.
It was wild.
Yeah.
To be honest, that boat will be completely submerged at the bottom, like nobody visible for a period of time.
And this is actually a really good way to kind of tee into this, where will you host your retreat, right? Because we were talking about, who's going to come to it. And part of understanding who's going to come to it and the value of it has to match where you host it, right? So we don't want you to say, I want to do a silent retreat in New York City, right? Like, and
Right.
I know that's a very exaggerated example, but it is really, really important that you understand the location in reference to who's coming and what kind of experience they're expecting to get out of it, and how that really fits your end game, how that
Hmm.
fits what you're trying to impart to those guests. So, you might think of, oh, well, I'll just host it in my backyard. And that's fine. You can totally have something that's close to you that makes sense. And maybe you even have local clients where it really does make sense. But you want to really think about, okay, what is the energy that I want people to be in? What do I want them to come away with? And so that's why, as coaches, we were living in Venice Beach. We did our first events with Mark in Malibu. From there, we actually did a lot of stuff in the mountain town of Big Bear that's just outside of LA. We wanted to kind of get people out of their kind of normal comfort zone, or what they would kind of perceive as similar to their normal kind of
Hmm.
pace and cadence, get them into an opportunity to experience themselves differently, and start curating some of these coaching components that we wanted to get into them, we wanted to infuse into them. So where you host your retreat is really, really important in terms of the takeaways and who's going to come to it.
Yeah, and it should flow well. And this is why, starting with your spark is kind of the most important. And I mean, you could have, I guess, the opposite, right? Where you're like, okay, I have to do this at Machu Picchu. You know what I mean? Like there's like a location that is the inspiration for the entire thing. But I feel, and we do that for some clients,
Yep.
but I feel like frequently in the coaching space, it's so much more about like, what is my message? What do I want my people to get out of this? And then what container is going to best serve that? And there's a multitude of sort of things around that. Like Vanessa was saying, do you have a local clientele that could meet at the beach or in your backyard or do something kind of low key? Or is it, like the case where we had people all over the world who needed to be, so the retreat location needed to be close to an international airport that made, so there's like always going to be these sort of criteria that start to narrow things down where you're like, okay, now what are my sort of um, non-negotiables? It's like, we're going
Yeah.
to hike every day, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. So we need to be in the mountains, we need to be close to an international airport, we need to have X, Y, and Z for rooming configurations. So you can really start to get into that, and we'll go super deep in this stuff in the challenge. But it's like this mindset around it is, what is the place that best serves what I'm trying to accomplish? And it's so important. Like
Yeah.
that piece of it is so important to get right, so that you don't end up, like Vanessa said, doing a silent retreat in Manhattan.
And
That's
one
a,
more thing just on location, one of the ways, especially if you're brand new and you're getting started and you're trying to figure out, well, because we wrote here, right? If you can imagine it, you can create it. And so the sky is really the limit. But if you are just getting started, one of the ways that you can think about this, which is a really, I think, amazing and approachable way to think about it, is, okay, I want to run my people through a day in the life. What is it like to really live this primal lifestyle? Because for many people, and we experience this for years, they may be the only person they know that eats that way, that thinks that way, that moves
Mhm.
that way. And so, one of the most important things you want to do is just get them into a location where they can actually experience what it's like to have that full day of living a primal life. And so that's a really great way to think about things when you're first getting started, is how do I just give people an immersive experience, and where's the best location to support that? From there, you'll start to realize that, eventually, and this is what happened for us, we had, clients that came to 3 immersions or 4 immersions,
Right.
and they started going, okay, what's next?
Like, I can coach this part.
Like I
Yeah.
get this part. So we're just kind of teeing you into, like, these are ways that you can progress, even if you have a vision to taking people to Machu Picchu and,
Mhm.
whitewater rafting in New Zealand. A good way to kind of get yourself going is to say, okay, well, let me get people into an immersive experience, and then where can we go from there?
Yeah. Yep. That's 100% true. And it really is it's a baby steps thing with events and retreats. I think. I mean, I'm risk averse, when it comes to this kind of stuff. And because we've,
Do you mind if I throw something in there? Because I
yeah,
love
Please,
that
yeah.
strategy, this like day in the life of it creates an experience where, maybe they're not traveling all the way to Machu Picchu, but still an investment in their time to come spend a day and just to be around others that are like sharing in the lifestyle. That is enough often to be like,
no,
I
it's
want more.
true. Yeah, no, it really is true, and it's such a great way to sort of get your feet on the ground, as an event planner,
Exactly.
because it's not, like frankly, it's just not for everybody. And there's certain aspects of it that if it wasn't the two of us, like as a team, it would be a lot harder because there's certain aspects that I'm really good at for my personality style, and then the same with Vanessa that we really complete each other in that regard. And there certainly are people out there who have both that just kind of that nail that stuff, but it is frequently in our experience you're like, oh wow, okay, I wasn't expecting people to have such a hard time figuring out how to get from the airport to the retreat center. Like, don't people travel? So there's all of this kind of stuff that's going to come up. Um, yeah, that it's just if you can baby step it and do something very small the first time out, it's just gonna, you're kind of building that stress inoculation, right? Like you get tougher and tougher and tougher as the things become more complicated.
Until you go through your first COVID
Until
year,
you
and
hit
then
your
you're
first
you're
pandemic lockdown,
bulletproof.
and then after that, hey man, no big deal. So let's talk about pricing, and then I want to just make sure we just take a moment for questions because this is like we're kind of drinking through a fire hose here, right?
Yep.
So this is how to price your retreat is kind of a broad topic. It's like because it just goes into the financials sort of the retreat in general, which we'll talk about a little bit more on the coming up. But the idea around pricing is the way that I like to think of it is first you want to understand kind of what your financial goal is for this event and running events in general. And we always encourage people to do profitable events because it's a lot of work. And so, but there are people who have profit centers that are significant. And what they want to do is have this retreat as a way to increase client retention, to give back, to create community, so that definitely exists as well. And so like a break-even retreat might be amazing if you have this other, profit situation sorted out. So that of course will play into it, but the process is fundamentally the same. You just need to know, okay, what do I want to get out of this? What is it going to be worth it, or what does it look like for me to be worth it? Do I want to just do one and see how it goes and then, prepare for the next and all of this stuff? And so the framework that we always like to think about with this is build it so that it's profitable, because you can always reduce the ticket price to break even, right? But go into it thinking, how do I make money with this as a new arm of my business? Because if you do it that way from the beginning, the infrastructure, the P&Ls that you use, all of the stuff that you create is going to be as robust as it would ever need to be if you decide to make this a full-on business. So while we're talking about baby steps from like a backyard to Machu Picchu, from a financial projection perspective, go all in because you're going to want the detail. You're going to want to know what's going on with this thing. So the two ways to sort of look at it is one, if you know your client base really well and maybe you've done some surveying or something, which is something we do a lot of, that they're like, yeah, for a 2-night, 3-day 2-night thing, I would be willing to pay X amount of money. Or you can just sort of like guess based on, the current offers and stuff that you have, and you say, yeah, I don't think my people are going to want to spend more than, $1,500 for an event.
Mhm.
Okay, now you have a budget and you can say, okay, well, I want to be able to do 10 to 15 people. So now I know what my budget is, and then you can work from there. You're starting with that fixed budget. The other way to do it is to build in your mind and then on the P&L, the spreadsheet, exactly the event that you want to do. And you can price it out and you're like, okay, this is what this thing looks like, and then add a margin to that cost, and then you've got it from that side. And I personally like the latter. I like to build the event that you want, um, and then see if it's going to work, and then rescale it. And it may seem like more work to do it that way because you're kind of like going through this process, but I believe that like reps is where it's at with this stuff. So it's almost like it's better for you to have to go through and iterate on the design and pricing of your retreat multiple times so that you really get clear on, well, you know what, maybe if this is too expensive, well, maybe then we don't really need this part. And that's going to help you really start to drill into a lot of the other important things, like how do you pace the event? Is there too much stuff in the itinerary already? How do I reduce cost? And whereas if you just set your budget, then you're like, well, let me see just how much stuff I can cram in here for this price. And that's actually something we're going to talk about next, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And no, it's perfect because when you're thinking about pacing your retreat, more is not more. And so, like Adam was saying, if you're thinking, well, I've got this budget, let me just pack in as much as I can because I want to get, the most bang for my buck, quite literally, you sort of get into a framework where that's the way that you're approaching it. And so for us, like Adam said, we like to kind of take that latter approach where it's like, let's build the vision, let's build the pace, let's build what's really, really, vital to this person's progression through this metamorphosis that we're trying to create. And then we'll start to see that the numbers will come in and we can massage things and see, okay, well, maybe we don't have $50 a person for a sound bath like we wanted on one of the days. Well, can Tara come over and do the sound bath for me? Can I buy a couple bowls? You can start to figure out how you can create that vision over, how do I just like make the budget fit what I want to do. So it starts to be a little bit more about that spark, which is, to me, I'm Miss Spark Girl. Like this, if you don't have the spark, if you aren't intrinsically connected to why it is that you want to create this and what journey you want to take people on, it's going to be so much more challenging to really create the schedule, the event, the pace, these important benchmarks that you're trying to hit, because you don't have that kind of concrete tether into the purpose and the spark of what you're trying to elicit for your clients. So it's really, really important that, you have all of the energy right. And then, we've kind of taken the approach to make the budget fit that. Of course, you might be a numbers person that it's all about the budget and you just like, that's how your brain works. So we always want to give you that option if that really works for your personality type. But what we're trying to say with this is just do not forget that intrinsic spark and how to kind of put this together in a pace that really, really works for what you're trying to help your customer experience.
Boom. Nailed it. So the pacing of a retreat, and this is, I think we definitely made these mistakes in the beginning, and it was, and the where it comes from is that you want to provide a bunch of value, right? You're like, okay, I'm going to get these people here, and I really want to wow them with all of the benefits, like what are we doing here? All of the features of this event, and then we're going to get so many benefits and all of this stuff, and a lot of times. And this is another place where we always ask this question during audience polling and surveying before we put together an event is like, okay, well, what's the ratio that you want of activity to downtime? What's the ratio that you want of sort of like didactic presentation to interactive stuff, like whatever you're doing? It's a great idea to kind of get your audience's take, because there are people who are used to attending conferences that are like, I want to go, my intention is to be here and just absorb information for 8 hours a day, and so you want to know if people are in that mindset, because if that's not what you want to do, then obviously you need to be able to communicate that's not what this event is about. So it's a great idea to get that feel. But let's just say that people are like, hey, I'm down with whatever you want to do. You really just have to throttle back a little bit on the intensity of content, at your event, and take into consideration things like transport times and how long it takes people to get ready. And, so this goes into the type of venue that you're going to get, because you're like, man, how many people are sharing bathrooms. If you've got 4 people to 1 bathroom and you're expecting everybody to be somewhere at such and such time, it ain't happening, you know? So you've got, it's all of that kind of stuff. And so we always really encourage people to kind of give people the minimum effective dose. And because a lot of the magic that occurs in these events is in the downtime, the transition time, where people are sitting around chit chatting and they develop that bond and something comes up. And even as facilitators and coaches, some of the most like profound and impactful coaching moments that we've probably ever have been on, like we used to do the coffee walk and talk in the morning, you know, and that was like the first thing we do. Everybody gets up, go outside to get your sunlight, grab your tumbler of coffee or whatever you like to drink, and we would just go for a walk. And over the course of that walk, we would get one-on-one walking and talking time with people, and the people get to know each other. And it's like, it just works. It works so well in comparison to, slideshow PowerPoint, which, I mean, obviously sometimes, you need that. It's, if you're presenting on a study, then, it seems like something that you probably need to maybe just show the slides on. But the pacing of the event, this idea of just sort of slowing down and leaving room for the magic and leaving room for the interaction and connection of the people, is something we really just can't quite stress enough. And I think Vanessa has like some specific rules about that, right?
Well, yeah. So, I mean, one of the things, and just to answer that, the rule that I always have is that there's at least 2 to 3 hours of downtime a day. And so, and typically we put that right after lunch. So people have an opportunity to kind of decompress, let their, digestion work, and also just to have a moment to regroup and kind of, regain their, and we even know just, physiologically, we need that little kind of 3 to 4 p.m. hour just gets we get a little bit glogged down. So you want to just make sure that you go with people's natural cadence of their body. And we know, people might be keto and they might be, fat adapted and they might be ready to go all day.
No insulin dips.
But at the end of the day, when you're on retreat, it's a bigger energetic demand. So even if people are able to, hard charge all day for 8 to 10 hours in their normal life, they just need a little bit of recovery, even emotionally or mentally. So we really want to just be thinking about having like a nice chunk of time that's at least 2 to 3 hours of time that's not spoken for. And Adam mentioned, we've used this phrase for years, which is leave room for the magic. And if you don't leave any open space, then you don't have any space for something magical to happen. And, could be just a conversation that you strike up with someone that you're on retreat with, or one of the coaches or whatever. Or it could be like, we had a group in the Redwoods one day, and it was during our downtime. We had this woman come up and play her beautiful flute and just, serenade us and sing for us and do this whole kind of little impromptu show. And so had we been, so committed and structured that we didn't have any space, we wouldn't have had any time for these magical things to come through. So there's lots of nuance when it comes to your pace and the schedule, but these are some big, overarching themes to be thinking about. And Warren, when we're talking about, you mentioned spark a few times. Please specifically explain how you define spark related to what you're presenting. So spark is the term that we use really for your inspiration of why you want to run this retreat. So why are you inspired to create this? And what we really want to encourage you to do is have an inspiration that's just beyond a financial goal. And that could be certainly part of it. You're excited to expand your business and have this new arm that you're offering and make money, and that's all great. But we don't want, the only reason you do something is just for the bottom line. We want to know, like, what are you excited to create for your customer? What are you excited to see happen for them? What are you excited to see happen for you in that kind of container? Does that help you grow as a coach and a facilitator to really have these deep immersive experiences with people? Are you really hoping that people will finally get an opportunity to go full 24 hours living a primal lifestyle without any kind of interruption from their normal world? So these are the kinds of things we want to think about, like what's in it for you and what's in it for them on a very, very deep and meaningful level. Does that help answer the question? Um, and these are great. You know, we love to hear more questions. Yeah, leave room for the magic. Love it. Awesome. Thanks. Great. Okay. So, do we want to turn it over for questions, or Tara, if you want to share anything of your experience? Because I know you have a ton of experience in event and retreat planning. So, love to hear from you. And then, of course, you guys, please ask questions. We want to just give you all the answers to your burning questions while we're here.
Oh, thank you so much, Vanessa and Adam. I really like your pace, even to this conversation, because as I'm listening and I'm hearing, even the strategies on the one hand, you can build the pricing structure, in this way, but this is how it's really worked well for us. And even how in the planning phase, how that impacts the pace, the vibe, the feel of what you're creating, and then bringing it back to the spark, the purpose, the why, like let that be your guiding light throughout the entire planning process. So I had, one question that came up. Well, actually, a side note also is like a rule of thumb. I also have just told myself, our job is to like create the space, do a really good job creating the space. The people, they bring the magic. Like what
Mm,
happens in those in-between spaces and places?
mm,
That's
Yeah.
like what we get to receive from it too. Like you
mhm.
couldn't have paid all the money in the world for that woman to show up with her flute and just serenade everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and and I love that you say that because there is, and I think that kind of speaks back to what Warren was asking about. There really is like this unique thing that is important for you, for your clients, but it's also going to change you as a facilitator and as a coach. It's going to completely rewire the neural network of how you interface with people and how you actually elicit change in them and how you kind of put yourself in a location to really, really be of service.
Mm.
And that just it can't come in the same way that it does in those immersive intimate experiences, the way that it can't come in the same way as having just an hour with someone virtually or even in person. It really is in that container of like closeness that you can start to really unveil these new aspects of your client's journey and yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, and we, the way that we've always structured these is almost like it's a ceremony in and of itself, right?
Yeah.
And so we do a proper opening and we do a proper closing, and and I think that there's something about that, just really creating the container. And it doesn't have to be, all hippy dippy or woo woo. Like it
Right.
does, it's totally unnecessary. Like, but open and close creates that container, and then everything that you do in between, is, and exactly like you said, Tara. I mean, I've given this speech impromptu a couple times at BFest, the big event that we do, and it's like, hey man, we're just creating this thing. Like we put together this thing in a really cool place and gave you guys some guidelines, and you all showed up and made it. And we're sharing with you what we think is important, but you guys are making it. And as you guys run events, I think you'll find that that's just the case, I mean, and like I hope that you find that, because it's such an amazing experience, like you said, Tara, to receive that, to be like, wow, this is cooler than I thought it was going to be, or that I could have imagined this was going to work out.
Yeah, and that feeds into you wanting to continue to be a coach, because what's one of the major, crosses to bear as a coach is burnout, right? And so having these experiences does feed back to you, and you have more stamina. I mean, we've been doing this now 12 years, like, and we're just as excited as ever. So,
Hmm.
it really does fill your cup, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah, Julie,
Great
yep.
question, Julie. So the I'll paraphrase, but basically what it comes down to is like once you start stacking up all of the costs, retreats are really expensive. And so how when you take into consideration additional speakers, a chef, all of the things. So how do you do it?
How do you do
How
it?
do you talk about budgeting? And so there are a few things, but the truth of it is they're expensive,
Yes.
and this is something that we see when when we're doing our retreat planning as a service. A lot of times people are surprised at just how expensive these things actually are. And there's a few ways, to where honestly, like one of the most profitable ways to run retreats is to be able to do it for yourself if you can, right? So if like having us in the middle is expensive. So one of the things that I think like a really good place to start is switching, you know, like look, because once you get a, okay, let me try to make this really succinct. The things that really kill profit on a retreat are non-paying attendees. So those are people who are going to come like speakers, right? So even if they're not getting paid, they're eating up margin, right? Because those people are not paying, they don't have a ticket. The other is crazy expenses that occur when you get involved with a commercial facility like a hotel. Like once you start dealing with hotels and you're dealing with food and beverage minimums and you're dealing with room blocks and you're dealing with these contracts that have things in there that if you're not an event planner or a travel person, you're just like, I don't know, what's an attrition rate? Why does this matter? You know, and like that's the quickest way for it to just snowball into this thing that's like, I don't understand what's going on and it seems really expensive, you know? And so I think that that kind of baby steps thing, getting an Airbnb, get, you know, the chef component, I mean, it's such an important thing to do, and it's worth, we've just been so blessed to have come across Chef Joanne, our chef, our executive chef, years ago. I mean, she's been with us since 2012,
Over, yeah,
I think, something
yeah,
like that, you know.
over 10 years. Yeah.
And that is one of the most important relationships that you can find. And so what I would do as part of your like, if having a like, obviously we're primal people, right? So food is super important, but if like a chef type experience of the food is important to you, then that would be one of the first things I would try to do, is go and develop a relationship with a chef where you could come up with something that's mutually beneficial, where you're not just straight up paying catering cost, because that you know, similar to a food and beverage situation at a hotel, that can be pretty expensive. So I would, and like where we found Joanne, actually she found us somehow, but which
Through
was
Mark.
through Mark.
Yeah, yeah.
But where she was from a business perspective is she had a small catering and event company. She had a company called with Purpose, which she did like paleo meal delivery and that kind of stuff. But she was, you know, running it and hungry and like, how do I grow my business and how do I get more involved in this, and had a passion for the kind of things that we were doing, A, paleo food, B, events. And so it was really easy to grow with her, you know. And I know that may sound like a daunting thing, but it's actually, I feel like there's, especially with Instagram and stuff available now, where you can go out and kind of go chef shopping. You're like, who's posting cool stuff that's in alignment with what I'm up to? And I would really look at that as like a primary relationship to develop, because if you can show them the benefit of doing it with you and probably save 25 to 30% on your food, that's going to be massive. And then the second piece would be an Airbnb. Get really creative with the venue space, because that's not only is it just going to be less expensive on like a per night ADR basis kind of thing, but you're not going to be involved at the contractual obligation level that you will with a hotel or a retreat, like a retreat specific space, something like Lumeria, you know, or Savannah, like these places that are, they're retreat centers. You're ultimately still getting, there's a lot of risk there. And so chef, yeah, definitely finding that chef relationship, and then looking at a venue that is just a lower barrier, you know, essentially.
And some of the things, and we see, Charles, your question, you'd like feedback on the difference between multiple speakers and being self-led. So again, what Adam said about, you know, the more speakers you add, the more cost, the lower the profit. So we actually always encourage anyone that comes to us as a, you know, client that wants to run an event, and they come in hot with like, I want a breathwork person, I want a sound bath person, and they have all these people that we want. And one of the things that we initially try to encourage them is like, this is your community, this is your opportunity to go deeper with your people. And if you bring in a bunch of outside speakers, although it may be super, super valuable, and we don't even, you know, we don't discourage you from that being a long-term kind of trajectory, in the beginning, beginning, what you really want to do is nurture and foster those really intimate containers, and start to go deeper into your own teachings and the own levels of what you can give. And then maybe you bring in one complementary person, because really once you start adding those extra people, the costs just go through the roof. And it's subtle. You don't think it's that big of a deal. You're like, oh, I'll just, add them, but they take a space away that is, that you would be selling otherwise. You have to pay for their food, probably transport. So even if you're not giving them a speaker fee, it does really reduce that bottom line. And then the other thing that we were going to say, or that I wanted to say about this, just the whole cost, story. One of the things that completely changed our business model was making sure that we had enough time where we could start bringing in payment plans for people. So one of the biggest objections for people is, if they have to make a big balloon kind of payment all at once, it becomes too hard for them in any kind of given, monthly scenario. But if we can spread that out 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, now what becomes available to them? And so more than, just necessarily trying to get it as cheap as possible, what we tried to do instead is, can we give people that are super price conscious, 6 months to pay it off, or some lead up that can bring down their bottom line? And that absolutely changed our business in the beginning. We went from, seeing a handful of people sign up to like sold out 18-person retreats. So that one, we do not underestimate that tactic. Furthermore, when you plan that far in advance, one of the things that you get is you actually can, you can negotiate your with your vendors kind of, in shoulder seasons or in times where things are not as expensive. And you can also, what was the other thing I was going to say? There was something else. The shoulder seasons and...
Well, I don't know if you were going here, but when you can plan that far in advance, sometimes you can pre-sell things before you actually have to put down deposits and everything. So that like really reduces the risk.
He's in my brain.
You're kind of like, you're saying, hey, can we put a soft hold on X amount of rooms in this place? And then you just hustle it up with your, with your community and see what you can sell and go from there.
Yes.
Because I think that's a whole other tactic, honestly, is how to reduce risk. Because this is the thing that obviously everybody is on everybody's mind. Like, how do I do this thing? If I build it, they will come. No, probably not. If you build it, you're going to have to really encourage them to come. It's still going to be the thing. So how do I not lose my ass on this?
Yeah.
And that's one of the things of like being super far out and planned and doing things, this, well, two things around that. So with an Airbnb, a lot of times you can have much more favorable cancellation policies and stuff. And so you could like hunt down a place where you're like, okay, my maximum, I can cancel at any time up until 60 days out, or, whatever it might be. You are not going to find that at any hotel when you are doing a room block, right? And so if you're coming into the hotel saying, hey, I want 40 rooms and I need your function space and I want a banquet dinner on X, Y, or Z night, you're going to sign that contract and be on the hook for that immediately, and there's nothing there. And so that's one of the other real sort of benefits of finding something that's a little more low key from that perspective, where you can sort of leverage those things. The other, sort of, guerrilla tactic with this stuff is that like sites like booking.com frequently have ridiculous cancellation policies. And so there are circumstances where, and I think back to like PrimalCon as an example, right? Where we had a park in Oxnard, and there was a hotel adjacent to it, but the park so where the thing was being held and the hotel that people were staying at had no relation to each other whatsoever. And so there was no worry about, am I, using the room block to get a reduction on function space and all of that kind of stuff. You can go to booking.com and book X amount of rooms and have a cancellation policy that's basically free cancellation up until, 2 days before or whatever, right? So there's all kinds of ways that you can kind of guerrilla your way into this thing. Yeah, and just leverage, because they're pre-buying this stuff at ridiculous rates, which is why they're always cheaper. So there's all sorts of ways that you can get in that. And so the one One other thing I'll just drop in there about the multiple speakers. There's a tendency, kind of like loading up the raw, or not the roster, but loading up the
Schedule.
itinerary or the schedule, because you want to put all this value forward. There's a tendency for people, and we see this even we work with some pretty high level people where you're like, they have lists of hundreds of thousands of people and they are famous, and they're still like, oh man, I want to bring this person, this person, this person, this person. And what we're always trying to encourage them is like, look, these people are here for you. You know, it's like, great if you think that these people can be supportive and add value to what you're doing, but certainly don't bring people in, thinking that they're going to help you sell tickets, because almost never does that help. And B, I'm not good enough to facilitate this thing on my own. Like, your fans want to see you. And if you can bring in ancillary support that is really supportive, then that's great. But there's a bit of a trap there, I think, that we can fall into with thinking we need that.
So we're kind of at time, and Jake, love that you're doing a camping trip. Yeah, there's always all kinds of ways to do this stuff, really inexpensive and get your feet wet. We're all for that. I think we're probably at the moment where we should talk a little bit about the challenge, because everyone, I can see the wheels are turning. You're starting to think like, okay, how can I actually do that? And that is literally what this Find Your Spark challenge is all about, is us kind of helping you through this next phase of like, okay, why do you want to do it? Where do you want to do it? Doing some research on the venue and kind of getting clear on what this initial sort of offering or this initial structure would look like. We'll kind of get you all the way to that space. So anyone that's feeling like, okay, I'm excited, I want to do it, but I'm still not sure what that could look like, that's literally what this challenge will be for. And then from there, if you decide like, okay, I really feel like I'm ready to go forward with this, obviously you'll have an opportunity to get into the course and potentially the lab and all of the things. But we got to find your spark, and we have to find out if this is for you, and if like you're ready to take on this challenge, and we can support you with that.
Yeah, and so I'm actually just going to drop the link to it in the chat. So it's free, anybody can go and register. And then it's going to actually kick off on Monday. There'll be 2 live calls with Vanessa and I to really help try to solidify this stuff with you guys. So it's really a great opportunity. So if you guys have the time to pop in there, and then we'll obviously record the calls and post them in there. So even if you don't make it live, there's still a ton of value for you there. So yeah, I would encourage everybody to pop in and do that, because it's just going to give us a chance to go so much deeper in the nuances of what we're talking about right now, and give you guys some more background on the spark and all of the things that we think are important. And I'll just say real quick, Jake, this is an amazing plan. The one thing that I can't believe Vanessa didn't tell you to do.
I almost did. I know.
Capture content.
Yes.
So this is your chance, because like every single event, you go into it, even if you're like, man, I'm just testing this out. What you're doing there is creating all of the content and all of the assets that are going to sell your next event. And so it's imperative.
If you don't have assets, it didn't happen. Like, honestly, it's like to your other customers, they have no frame of reference. So capture, film, video, that is, beyond your relationship with your chef. Video assets and photo assets are the most important thing that you can do at each event, because it's going to help you in spades to sell your next event.
Oh, perfect. And you've got somebody coming.
Bringing someone to film. You got it.
You're
awesome.
on it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Any questions? We're happy to stick around, but wanted to just kind of put a bow on it for people. It seems that Darlene had to go. Or Tara, anything else that you want to share or ask before we wrap?
Well, this is great. This is another example how Primal Health is here to support our coaches in all ways possible. I mean, what's happening here today, it's like we're just getting started, and it's as if we're in an incubation session with you now. So I can hardly wait to get on into this challenge, find my spark, and meet you guys more in the space that you've created for all of us. This is just so special. One question I do have is, what do you have, like a rule of thumb for, like, ideally I give myself in a perfect world a year or 9 months, or how do you go about planning?
I mean, 6 to 12 months is kind of that sweet spot. Obviously it can be a little bit shorter when you're getting started and maybe doing some, smaller events and, getting your feet wet. But again, what it really comes down to, and we pretty much structure all of our events on this, is how much time do we need to be able to get that location, get a soft hold on it without having to be a bunch of money out of pocket up front. And then also, how can we structure this payment wise for people so that it's an easy no brainer? I say yes to this in 4 seconds. If you send me a link and I go, oh, I can sign up for this for $300 right now, then it's like boom. I wasted that on Primal Mayo this month. Or not wasted it, I invested it in Primal Mayo. But it just becomes a no-brainer for people. So that's always the sweet spot that we're massaging, is like, how far out do I need, and what do I want my payments to look like?
Beautiful.
Yeah, and then of course venue selection.
Yes.
Like that's the other big one is, if the place that you just have to do it, like a Kardashian got married at, like you're going to need at least a year, to be able to book that out.
Yeah, but this is great, Tara, because this is exactly what we're going to help people kind of sort out in the challenge with the timing and the location. And our goal in a perfect world is that we would get you with like a date on the calendar by the end of the challenge that you're like shooting for and going for, because we know that just putting that date on the calendar helps to sort of consolidate and get you into action. So yeah. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Sybil and Julie. Sounds fun. Looking forward to the challenge. Yeah, we look forward to it as well. Yeah, there'll be 2 live calls with us. So we'll, and interactive calls too. So not just us.
One way. Yeah, because the thing that we just find is that there's a lot of ways to go about all of these things, and something that like just having, because the way that you want to do it might not be probably won't be exactly what we've done, but just the experience that we have in doing this, we've tried a lot of different things, we've seen a lot of different approaches to this stuff, and so there's valuable experience to be shared over here that we could just never create a slideshow that's going to nail. Yeah. You know what I mean? So the interactive piece is great. Question: what took you guys to Jackson? Well, so this is kind of
2020.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, we're essentially an event company, right? Our entire thing operates on us being able to get people together in person, and it was becoming unclear whether or not or when that was going to be possible to do in California. Or in a lot of places. And so we were like, well, where do we go that we can start hosting and running our events? Our entire book of international events got postponed for 2 years. I mean, kind of 1 year at a time, this, and then next and next. And so we really needed to be somewhere that we, could
at least host
operate
locally.
Yeah, to be able to operate our business. And so we've been a Wyoming company forever, just because Wyoming companies make sense to some degree. And so we were like, well, I don't know. We literally spent one night here before. We ran a retreat in Montana, and we drove down through Jackson and spent one night. And we were like, this place is really cool. And so in 2020, we're like, let's move to Jackson. That seems like a totally easy thing to do, and it worked out. So we've been here
and it's really beautiful. It's a special place. And in fact, for those of you considering retreats, we've run really amazing experiences here. And what's cool about Jackson Hole is that you actually really have 4 opportunities seasonally to run events. I mean, you can pretty much do a winter wonderland experience. Fall is amazing. Summer's amazing. Spring's the only one that's a little bit iffy, but even spring can be viable. So
sometimes it's in July.
Yeah. These are just like, ways to think about places in general, like how many viable seasons. Like we know in Florida, you're not going to run a summer event, right? Like there's going to be some places where really there's just like maybe 3 months of the year that's a viable place or a viable timeline. So it's cool to think about locations in terms of like, oh wow, there's 3 seasons or 4 seasons I could run an event there. That really starts getting you into the pocket of where you can find the best value financially for your investment in your location. And so yeah, Jackson Hole's been really great for that.
Yeah.
Florida would be a heat stroke. Yeah, it would be instead of a cold immersion, it'd be hot immersion. Just a sauna.
Just a suffering retreat. Yeah. But hey, man, people are into all kinds of stuff,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, great job, you two. It's been a joy and a pleasure to witness your partnership and how you dream weave and support each other. Like what a beautiful offering. And may this be the beginning of so many of us primal coaches coming together to learn more from you.
Yeah.
Thank you
I hope
so
so.
much. We appreciate the opportunity, and yeah, we want to help you create your incredible events to change the world. That's all.
Yeah. Yeah. Just little small things,
Small
small things
goals.
like changing the world 10 to 25 people at a time.
Yeah.
It matters.
Good luck,
Yeah.
Jake, with your event. We wish you the best. Thanks, Julie. Thanks, Warren. Thanks, everybody. Sybil, everybody. It was nice to meet you. Well, we hope to see you out there in the wild somewhere.
Yeah. And in the challenge.
And in the challenge. Yep.
You and the challenge. Bye,
Bye.
everybody.